This is the story of how they vanished. It did not happen with a bang, or with fire, or with any of the terrible, violent finalities we have since come to associate with that name. This was different. This was quiet. This was impossible. It began with a flicker. A man named Arthur Phelps, a bond trader with a caffeinated tremor in his hands and a 5-figure bonus on his mind, was hurrying through the Austin J. Tobin Plaza. He was late, as usual. As he glanced up to gauge the sun's position relative to his office on the 104th floor of the North Tower, he saw it. For a fraction of a second, the very top of the tower, the antenna and the pinnacle, seemed to waver. It was like heat haze off summer asphalt, a distortion of light and substance. He blinked, shook his head, and attributed it to the 4 espresso shots currently warring in his bloodstream. He pushed through the revolving doors, the moment forgotten. An hour later, a tourist from Ohio, Brenda Schuler, was framing the perfect shot with her Nikon F3. She wanted both towers in the frame, with the Woolworth building peeking between them. She focused, held her breath, and pressed the shutter. When the film was developed weeks later, back in Dayton, the photo would show a clear, sharp image of the New York skyline. But in the space where the South Tower should have been, there was only empty, blue sky. Brenda, looking through her viewfinder in real time, saw nothing amiss. She lowered her camera, satisfied with the composition she had captured, utterly unaware that her camera had seen something her eyes had not. The first collective sign something was wrong came just before noon. A pervasive, low hum began to emanate from the buildings themselves. It wasn't loud, but it was felt more than heard. A vibration that traveled up through the soles of shoes and settled in the fillings of teeth. Pigeons that normally clustered on the ledges took flight in a single, startled cloud. Inside, office workers felt a sudden, inexplicable wave of vertigo. Pens rolled off desks. A framed poster of a kitten hanging onto a branch, ubiquitous in cubicles of the era, swung crooked on its nail. Then, the silence. The hum ceased so abruptly that its absence was a sound in itself. The city's eternal roar, which had been the backdrop to everything, seemed to be pulled away, sucked into a vacuum. For 10 seconds, there was perfect, unearthly quiet in the financial district. And then, the screaming started. It did not come from inside the towers. It came from the streets, from the people outside looking up. Elias Vance, a hot dog vendor who had held his spot on the corner of Church and Bessie for 20 years, was the first to voice the horror. He was looking up, wiping his hands on his stained apron, when he saw the South Tower. Dissolve. It was the only word for it. It wasn't a collapse. It wasn't an explosion. It was as if the building was made of sand, and a divine, invisible hand had simply decided to let the grains fall. From the top down, the solid, immovable steel and concrete blurred into a shimmering, silent cascade of nothingness. It lost its form, its edges softening, its substance turning into a waterfall of light and particulate matter that vanished before it could reach the ground. It was a terrifying magic trick performed on a colossal scale. In less time than it takes to draw a breath, the 110-story building was simply gone. No rubble. No dust cloud. No sound. Just an empty plot of land where a billion-ton Leviathan had stood moments before. The silence that followed was broken by Elias's raw, ragged shout. "It's gone!" Heads swiveled. Commuters pouring out of the PATH station stopped in their tracks. Brokers on their lunch breaks, clutching brown paper bags, froze. 1,000 pairs of eyes turned to where the South Tower had been, and 1,000 minds refused to process the information. The sky was wrong. The balance was broken. There was a giant hole in the world. Panic was not instantaneous. It was preceded by a profound, collective disbelief. People rubbed their eyes. They pointed with trembling fingers, their mouths agape, forming silent questions. The human brain, confronted with the impossible, first tries to find a rational explanation. A trick of the light, a sudden, localized fog. but the sky was relentlessly clear. The hole was relentlessly empty. Then, as the reality began to seep through the cracks of denial, the panic erupted. It was a wave of sound and motion. Sirens, which had been silent during the event itself, now wailed to life as if in delayed shock. Police officers, their faces masks of confusion and terror, tried to form barricades where there was nothing to barricade. People ran, but they didn't know where to run. What was the threat? What had happened? Was it an attack? A weapon? Something else. Inside the North Tower, the world had become a different kind of nightmare. The vertigo returned, 100 times stronger. The floor beneath their feet felt insubstantial, like standing on a cloud. Those near the windows who had witnessed the South Tower's disappearance were either catatonic or screaming hysterically. The phones were dead. The lights flickered. A voice, calm and automated, came over the PA system. "The building is secure. Please remain at your desks." The message, so utterly divorced from the reality of the situation, fueled a new kind of terror. Arthur Phelps, on the 104th floor, felt a cold sweat break out all over his body. He had seen the flicker that morning. He now understood it had been a warning. He joined the stampede for the stairwells, a river of suits and terror flowing down a cramped, concrete spiral. The air grew thick with the smell of fear and perfume. No one spoke. The only sounds were the frantic slap of leather soles on concrete and the ragged, sobbing breaths of people trying not to think about the 103 floors of empty air still above them. Down on the street, the chaos was congealing into a frantic, disorganized response. Emergency vehicles converged on a disaster site with no disaster. Fire trucks parked where the South Tower's lobby should have been, their ladders pointing uselessly at the sky. News helicopters, which had been monitoring traffic, swarmed the area, their camera lenses broadcasting the impossible void to a waking nation. And then, as the world watched, the North Tower began to fade. It started at the base this time. The solid, granite-clad columns at the ground level became translucent. You could see the people running behind them, their forms distorted as if seen through old, wavy glass. The translucence spread upwards, a wave of erasure climbing the facade. It moved slowly, deliberately, floor by floor. The building was being unmade from the bottom up. From the stairwells, the prisoners of the North Tower felt the change. The solidity of the steps beneath their feet began to soften. A woman shrieked as her high heels sank into the concrete as if it were soft clay. The walls lost their texture, becoming smooth, then misty. The air grew cold, a deep, space-like cold. Arthur, now on the 40th floor, looked at his hand on the railing. He could see the railing through his flesh. He was becoming a ghost in a ghost building. On this street, the television cameras captured the final, silent act. The North Tower, once a symbol of unshakable power, became a shimmering mirage, its edges blurred, its form dissolving into a million points of light that twinkled for a moment like a galaxy being born and then were snuffed out. The antenna on top was the last to go, a single, defiant line against the blue, before it too was consumed by the nothingness. And then there was only sky. Two of the tallest buildings in the world, housing tens of thousands of people, filled with art, with lives, with dreams and mundane paperwork, had vanished without a trace. Tay. Warehoused. Gone. Gone. The immediate aftermath was a special kind of hell. The rescue operation for a building that no longer existed. The frantic phone calls to numbers that would never be answered. The families holding vigils at a fence surrounding an empty hole in the ground. The national trauma was profound, but it was a trauma of confusion, of a violated reality. There was no enemy to blame, no ideology to fight. It was an anomaly, a glitch in the matrix of the physical world. A government task force, shrouded in maximum secrecy, was formed. Tay Kaidit, the vanishing. Scientists, metaphysicists, and military strategists were locked away in a facility in Nevada. Tasked with answering the unanswerable, they sifted through every piece of data. The tourist's photograph from Ohio, seismic readings which had registered a profound, non-physical negative pulse, thousands of eyewitness accounts. They found nothing. No radiation, no chemical residue, no energy signature. It was as if the laws of physics had taken a day off. The official story, fed to a terrified public, was one of a catastrophic structural failure of a nature so unique and unprecedented that it resulted in near-total molecular dissipation. It was a phrase designed to sound scientific, while explaining nothing. Conspiracy theories blossomed like toxic flowers. A secret government energy weapon test gone wrong. A rift in space, an alien abduction on an unimaginable scale. The most persistent theory was that the towers had never been real to begin with, that they were a collective hallucination, a phantom limb of the American psyche that had finally been emptied. But for those who were there, for those who lost someone, the theories were meaningless. The absence was the only truth. The site, dubbed Ground Zero, in a grim premonition of a tragedy yet to come, became a place of pilgrimage. People would come and stare into the empty space, trying to feel the echo of the giants that were. They would leave flowers and notes that fluttered in the wind, messages to avoid. The city, in its relentless way, moved on. New buildings were planned, the skyline was redesigned, but the soul of downtown had been hollowed out. The constant was gone. Arthur Phelps, who had escaped the North Tower with seconds to spare, quit his job. He could no longer bear the feeling of solid ground. It felt like a lie. He moved to a small town in Kansas, where the horizon was flat and uninterrupted. He spent his days staring at the sky, waiting for it to flicker again. Brenda Schuller's photograph became infamous. It was analyzed by every intelligence agency and paranormal investigation team on the planet. It was the only objective proof that the vanishing had been a process, that the towers had begun to unexist even before anyone had noticed. She was hounded by the press until she finally threw the negative and all the prints into a lake, trying to drown the ghost that haunted her. Years turned into decades. A new, single, defiant tower was built on the site, the One World Trade Center, a monument to resilience. But it stood next to the haunting memorial, two reflecting pools set into the footprints of the vanished twins, waterfalls cascading into a central void. People would run their fingers over the names engraved in the bronze parapets, the names of the lost. But everyone knew the true number of the lost was higher. It included the skyline itself, a city's confidence, and a piece of the world's solidity. The vanishing remained the great unsolved mystery of the 21st century. It was a hole in history, a question mark etched into the very fabric of New York City. Scientists eventually classified it as a spontaneous existential collapse, a term that admitted they had no idea what had happened. To this day, if you stand at the edge of the South Pool, looking into the dark water as it flows into that seemingly bottomless square drain, you can feel it. It's not just the memory of what was. It's the chilling presence of the impossible. It's the knowledge that the world we take for granted, the world of steel and stone and unshakable truths, is fragile, that the constants in our lives are only constant until the moment they are not. That sometimes things don't fall, they don't break, they don't burn, they just vanish. And the story of the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center is not a story of how they fell. It is the story of the morning the world looked up and saw an empty sky, and has been trying to fill it with answers ever since. It is a story that whispers a terrifying truth. Nothing is too big to be lost.